That was the text message my sister Cordelia sent me on October 15th, exactly 5 weeks before Thanksgiving. I stared at my phone screen in the parking lot of Meridian Community Bank, where I'd just finished a routine meeting about my investment portfolios. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I controlled every single one of their financial accounts, their mortgages, their business loans, and their children's college funds. And in exactly 39 days, they were about to find out what happened when you cut off the person who'd been quietly keeping your entire family financially afloat for the past 8 years. Hold up, I'm curious where you're listening from. And if this story spoke to you, make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, what I have planned for tomorrow is going to blow you away. My name is Ramona Thorne. I am 34 years old, and I'm a certified financial planner and investment advisor with my own practice in Millbrook Heights, a suburb about 2 hours north of where I grew up. Most people assume I got lucky in finance, that I stumbled into money somehow. The truth is messier and much more deliberate. After our parents died in a car accident when I was 22, I inherited their life insurance policies, their house, and the responsibility of keeping our fractured family together. While my 3 siblings, Cordelia, Jasper, and Beatrix, were busy grieving and making poor decisions, I was quietly building something that would protect all of us. 8 years ago, when Cordelia was drowning in credit card debt from her failed boutique business, I didn't just loan her money. I restructured her entire financial life, moved her debt to accounts I managed, and created payment plans she could actually handle. When Jasper needed a down payment for his house but had terrible credit, I didn't co-sign a loan. I purchased the property through one of my LLCs and set up a rent-to-own arrangement that would eventually transfer ownership to him, while building his credit in the process. When Beatrix's twins needed college funds, I didn't just contribute. I opened education savings accounts that I funded and managed, ensuring the money would be there when they turned 18. They thought I was just being a good sister. What I was actually doing was creating a safety net so comprehensive that none of them understood how dependent they'd become on my financial architecture. Every mortgage payment, every car loan, every emergency fund, every investment account. I was either the primary account holder, the guarantor, or the fund manager. It wasn't control for control's sake. It was protection for people who had proven, repeatedly, that they couldn't protect themselves. But apparently, being a good sister wasn't enough when you refused to apologize for something that wasn't your fault. The embarrassment Cordelia was referring to happened 3 weeks ago at our cousin Minerva's wedding in Crescent Valley. Cordelia had spent months planning this elaborate family reunion weekend, positioning herself as the matriarch of our generation now that our parents were gone. She'd booked a block of rooms at the Grandview Inn, organized a family brunch, and made sure everyone knew she was the one coordinating everything. What she didn't coordinate was checking with me before announcing to the entire extended family that I'd be covering the costs for everyone's hotel rooms and meals. I found out about this generous offer when our great-aunt Philomena thanked me for sponsoring the reunion weekend, mentioning how Cordelia had told everyone that I insisted on treating the family since I was doing so well financially. The assumption wasn't wrong. I could afford it, and honestly, I probably would have offered if asked. But being volunteered to pay for 23 people's weekend expenses without so much as a conversation felt less like family generosity and more like financial ambush. When I quietly pulled Cordelia aside and asked why she'd committed my money without asking, her response was classic Cordelia. "Oh, come on, Ramona, don't be petty. You have more money than you know what to do with, and family should support family. I didn't think you'd be so selfish about it." Selfish. That word hung in the air between us like smoke. This from the sisters whose boutique failure I absorbed, whose credit I rebuilt, whose mortgage I essentially had been subsidizing for 3 years through a below-market loan arrangement that saved her $800 a month. Selfish. I didn't make a scene. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, "Next time, ask first," and walked away. But Cordelia wasn't done. She followed me into the hotel lobby and launched into a 15-minute lecture about family loyalty, financial responsibility to the people who loved you, and how I'd changed since I'd started making real money. The conversation ended with her saying I'd embarrassed her in front of the entire family by questioning her judgment, and that maybe I needed to think about what kind of sister I really wanted to be. The irony was suffocating. I'd spent 8 years being exactly the kind of sister she claimed to want. The one who showed up with money when it was needed, who fixed problems quietly, who never asked for recognition or gratitude. But apparently, I was supposed to do it silently and on demand without the inconvenience of being consulted.
That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, the family group chat had been notably quiet whenever I posted anything, but active with conversations I wasn't included in. The message was clear: fall in line and apologize or be excluded. What they didn't understand was that exclusion works both ways. And unlike their attempts to freeze me out emotionally, my version would have some very tangible consequences. That night, I sat in my home office surrounded by files I hadn't opened in years. The original loan documents, the account authorizations, the power of attorney papers they'd signed when they thought they were just streamlining paperwork. Most people don't read the fine print when family is helping them. Most people assume good intentions will last forever. Most people don't plan for what happens when good intentions meet bad boundaries. As I reviewed each account, each agreement, each carefully constructed financial arrangement I'd built to protect them, I realized something that would have shocked them. I didn't need their forgiveness. I didn't need their Thanksgiving invitation. I didn't need to apologize for refusing to be their silent ATM. What I needed was for them to understand the difference between family support and family exploitation. And I had exactly 39 days to teach them that lesson. We poured our hearts into researching and telling this story. If you're hooked, show some love with a subscribe. Now, where were we? The first sign that this was bigger than just Cordelia's wounded pride came 4 days later, when I got a call from my youngest sister, Beatrix. Unlike Cordelia's dramatic pronouncements, Beatrix usually approached conflict like she was diffusing a bomb, carefully, quietly, hoping to solve things before they exploded. "Ramona," she said, her voice carrying that particular strain of someone trying very hard to sound casual, "I think maybe you should just apologize to Cordelia. You know how she gets when she feels disrespected. And honestly, it wasn't that big of a deal at the wedding." I was reviewing quarterly reports for my clients, but something in Beatrix's tone made me set down my pen. "Bea, she volunteered my money without asking. That's not about respect, that's about boundaries." "But you have the money," she said. And there it was, the assumption that had been lurking under every family interaction for years. And you know she was just trying to make the family look good. She didn't mean anything by it. "What did she promise this time?" I asked directly. The silence stretched long enough to confirm my suspicion. Finally, Beatrix sighed. "She might have mentioned that you'd probably help with the twins' spring semester tuition. The bills are due in January, and with Jeremy's hours getting cut at the plant." My stomach dropped. The twins were 17, seniors in high school, counting on the college funds I'd been building for them since they were 9. But apparently, Cordelia had graduated from volunteering my money for weekend trips to volunteering it for college expenses. "I asked you to help with tuition, Bea?" "Well, no, but Cordelia said you'd mentioned—" "I didn't mention anything to Cordelia about tuition. When was the last time Cordelia and I had a conversation about the twins' college plans?" Another silence. I don't know, but she seems so sure." That's when I realized this wasn't about one wedding weekend. This was about a pattern I'd been too close to see. For years, I'd been the family's financial safety net, but somewhere along the way, Cordelia had appointed herself as the person who decided when and how that net got used. She wasn't just taking credit for my generosity. She was making promises on my behalf, putting me in positions where saying no made me look selfish, and positioning herself as the family coordinator who made things happen. "Bea, I need you to do me a favor. Don't mention to Cordelia that we talked about this, but can you ask Jasper if she said anything to him about me covering any upcoming expenses? Why would she? Just ask, please. 2 hours later, Beatrix called back. Her voice was different this time, confused and a little angry. Ramona, Jasper says Cordelia told him you'd already agreed to help with his roof repairs this winter, the ones he hasn't even gotten estimates for yet. And she mentioned something about you wanting to upgrade everyone's Christmas gifts this year to make up for the wedding thing. My hands tightened on the phone. Cordelia wasn't just excluding me from Thanksgiving. She was systematically committing my money across the family while painting me as the unreasonable sister who needed to apologize her way back into everyone's good graces. It was financial manipulation dressed up as family coordination. That night, I opened my laptop and started digging through 8 years of financial records. What I found was a masterclass in dependency creation, not intentional on my part, but absolutely systematic in its results.
Jasper's house? I held the mortgage through Thorne Family Holdings, an LLC I'd created to simplify the paperwork. His monthly payments were $600 below market rate, and the agreement included a clause that let me call the loan due with 90 days' notice if the arrangement was no longer beneficial to both parties. Cordelia's business debt? After her boutique failed, I'd consolidated her $47,000 in credit card debt into a personal loan with a 3% interest rate. The formal agreement required monthly payments, but I'd been letting her slide for 2 years, effectively gifting her about $1,200 a month in missed payments and interest. Beatrix's twins' college funds. The accounts were in my name as the custodian, with the twins as beneficiaries. Legally, the money was mine until they turned 18 and I chose to release it. The monthly contributions came from my accounts, and I'd never asked for any contribution from Beatrix or her husband Jeremy. Family insurance policies. After our parents died, I'd kept everyone on a group health insurance plan through my business, absorbing the monthly premiums because individual coverage would have been more expensive for them. The annual cost was roughly $18,000 spread across 4 adults and 2 teenagers. Emergency interventions. Over the years, I'd covered Cordelia's car repairs, $3,400, Jasper's emergency appendectomy copay, $2,800, Beatrix's HVAC replacement, $5,200, and approximately a dozen smaller crises that had been handled with quick transfers and handshake agreements to pay me back when things settled down. The total amount was staggering, not because any single intervention was unreasonable, but because the cumulative effect had created a system where my family's financial stability depended on my continued generosity, while my emotional connection to them apparently depended on my continued compliance. I made a spreadsheet. Column A, family member. Column B, monthly financial benefit from me. Column C, total amount I'd provided over 8 years. Column D, amount they'd actually repaid. Cordelia, $1,600 per month in subsidies, $89,000 total provided, $3,200 repaid. Jasper, $800 per month in below-market mortgage payments, $52,000 total provided, 0 repaid, since the below-market rate was the arrangement. Beatrix, $400 per month in insurance plus college fund contributions, $67,000 total provided, 0 repaid. I stared at the numbers for a long time. This wasn't family support. This was a financial ecosystem where I was the primary producer and everyone else was a consumer, and now the consumers were dictating terms to the producer. The next morning, I called my attorney, Patricia Holloway, who'd helped me structure the original loan agreements and LLC arrangements years ago. Patricia, I need to understand my legal position if I wanted to restructure some family financial arrangements. What kind of restructuring? The kind where people might need to start paying market rates for things they've been getting at family rates. There was a pause. Ramona, are you okay? This doesn't sound like you. I'm fine, but I'm starting to realize that good intentions without boundaries aren't actually good for anyone. We spent an hour going through my options.
The legal reality was stark. I had the right to call in loans, terminate below-market arrangements, close accounts I controlled, and stop voluntary contributions at any time. The emotional reality would be messier, but Patricia was blunt about that too. If you've been subsidizing their lifestyles for years and they've structured their budgets around that support, removing it suddenly will cause real hardship. You need to decide if you're trying to teach them a lesson or trying to cause financial damage, because the line between those two things might be thinner than you think. That afternoon, I got a call from our great-aunt Philomena, the family matriarch who'd raised our father after his parents died. At 78, she didn't waste time with small talk. "Ramona, dear, I need to ask you something directly. Did you or did you not agree to pay for everyone's holiday travel expenses this year?" My stomach dropped. "What holiday travel expenses?" "Cordelia called me yesterday to confirm the flight arrangements for everyone to come to Millbrook Heights for Thanksgiving at your house for Thanksgiving. She said you'd decided to host this year and wanted to cover everyone's travel costs as an apology gesture." I closed my eyes. Cordelia had escalated from volunteering my money to volunteering my home. "Aunt Philomena, I'm not hosting Thanksgiving. In fact, according to Cordelia, I'm not even invited to Thanksgiving." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, she spoke, her voice carrying a chill I'd never heard before. "I think you and I need to have a conversation, dear. And I think Cordelia and I need to have one too." That night, I sat in my office with Patricia's legal summary in front of me and Aunt Philomena's words echoing in my mind. This wasn't just about Cordelia anymore. This was about a family dynamic that had slowly shifted from mutual support to systematic exploitation, and now it was spiraling into outright deception. I opened a new document on my computer and began typing "Family Financial Restructuring Plan," effective December 1st. If they wanted to exclude me from the family, that was their choice. But they were about to learn that you can't exclude someone while still expecting them to pay the bills. The plan was simple, legal, and comprehensive. In exactly 33 days, the financial safety net I'd spent 8 years building would no longer exist.
And unlike their emotional manipulation, my consequences would have exact dollar amounts attached. The breaking point came on November 3rd, exactly 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, when I received a certified letter addressed to the Thorne family financial manager at my business office. Inside was a formal invoice from Grandview Catering Services for $4,200 with a note that read, "Per your sister Cordelia's instructions, we've prepared the attached quote for Thanksgiving dinner service for 28 guests at the Millbrook Heights residence. Payment is due upon acceptance of services. Thank you for choosing Grandview for your family celebration." I stared at the invoice until the numbers blurred. Cordelia hadn't just told the family I was hosting Thanksgiving, she'd hired caterers and given them my business address for billing. This wasn't family coordination anymore. This was identity theft wrapped in holiday tradition. My hands were shaking when I called Patricia's office. "I need you to send a cease and desist letter immediately," I said, before she could even finish her greeting. "Ramona, slow down. What happened?" "Cordelia is impersonating me to vendors. She's entering into contracts using my name and my business as the billing address. This isn't family drama anymore. This is fraud." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Send me everything. I'll draft the letter today. But Ramona, once we send this, there's no taking it back. This escalates everything to legal territory." "Good," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Maybe legal territory is exactly where this needs to go. That afternoon, I drove to Aunt Philomena's house in Crescent Valley. If anyone was going to understand the full scope of what Cordelia had been doing, it would be the woman who'd spent 50 years navigating family politics with the precision of a chess master.
Philomena lived in the same Victorian house where she'd raised our father, and walking through her front door always felt like stepping into a museum of family history. Photos of 4 generations lined the hallway, and the dining room table, where we'd had countless Sunday dinners growing up, was set for tea as if she'd been expecting me. "Sit down, dear," she said, pouring from a china teapot that had belonged to my great-grandmother. "Tell me everything, and don't leave out any details." For the next hour, I laid out 8 years of financial arrangements, broken promises, and escalating assumptions. Philomena listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a small pad beside her teacup. When I finished with the catering invoice, she set down her pen and looked at me with the same expression she'd worn when she caught me and my cousins stealing cookies as children. Disappointed, but not surprised. "Cordelia called me yesterday. She wanted to make sure I understood that you were going through some kind of emotional crisis and that the family needed to be patient with your selfish phase until you came to your senses. She said you'd probably try to spread lies about her to avoid taking responsibility for embarrassing everyone at the wedding." My teacup rattled against the saucer as I set it down. "She said I was spreading lies?" She also mentioned that if you continued being difficult, she might have to take over managing the family's financial arrangements since you'd become unreliable as you got older. Philomena's voice carried a razor's edge of anger. She suggested that perhaps she should be the one handling everyone's insurance, loans, and college funds going forward because she understood family loyalty better than you did. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Cordelia wasn't just excluding me from Thanksgiving, she was positioning herself to take over the financial control I'd built over 8 years, painting me as unstable so she could justify seizing assets that legally belonged to me. "Aunt Philomena, those accounts, those loans, they're all in my name. Legally, I'm the one responsible for them." "I know, dear, which is why I told Cordelia that she was welcome to take over the payments on everyone's accounts if she felt you were no longer suitable for the job." Philomena's smile was sharp as her best carving knife. Strangely, she seemed much less interested in family financial management when I mentioned the actual dollar amounts involved. That evening, I sat in my office with a stack of account statements and a calculator, building what Patricia had called my nuclear option. The plan was comprehensive, legal, and would take effect the day after Thanksgiving, November 24th. I called it the Family Independence Initiative because if they wanted me out of their lives, they should have the independence they claimed to want. Phase 1, loan restructuring. Jasper's below-market mortgage would convert to standard market rates, effective December 1st. His monthly payment would increase from $1,400 to $2,200. Cordelia's consolidated debt, which she'd been ignoring for 2 years, would require immediate payment of all missed installments, $28,800, by January 15th, or the debt would be sold to a collection agency. Phase 2, account closure. The family health insurance plan would be terminated December 31st, giving everyone 30 days to find individual coverage. The twins' college fund accounts would be transferred to educational trusts that required both parents' signatures and documented academic progress to access funds, removing my ability to be pressured into early withdrawals.
Phase 3, service termination. All emergency financial support, informal loans, and subsidized arrangements would end. Future requests would require written applications with repayment terms, co-signers, and market rate interest. The plan was fair. Nobody would lose money they'd actually earned or property they legally owned. But they would lose the hidden subsidies that had been allowing them to live above their means for years. I printed 3 copies of the plan and sealed them in envelopes addressed to Cordelia, Jasper, and Beatrix. The letters would be delivered by certified mail on November 24th, ensuring they arrived when the family was gathered together for the Thanksgiving I wasn't invited to attend. But first, I needed to handle the catering situation. The next morning,
I called Grand View Catering and asked to speak with the manager who'd sent the invoice. "This is Ramona Thorne," I said when she came on the line. "I understand my sister contacted you about Thanksgiving catering using my name and business address." "Oh, yes, Miss Thorne. Cordelia spoke so highly of you. She said you were very particular about quality for family events." "I need you to understand something important," I said carefully. "I did not authorize this catering arrangement. I am not hosting Thanksgiving dinner. Cordelia does not have permission to enter into contracts on my behalf." The silence stretched uncomfortably long. I don't understand. She seemed so sure, and she had all your contact information." "She's my sister, so of course she has my contact information. But having someone's phone number doesn't give you authority to make financial commitments in their name." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "I'm going to need you to cancel this order and remove my business from your billing records for this event." But what about the deposit? Cordelia said you'd cover any cancellation fees as part of the family arrangement." My jaw clenched. Even when caught in outright deception, Cordelia had found a way to stick me with the bill. "How much is the cancellation fee?" "With less than 2 weeks' notice, it would be $1,200. I closed my eyes and made a decision that surprised me. "I'll pay the cancellation fee, but I want documentation that this order was placed without my knowledge or consent, and I want Cordelia's contact information removed from any future communications about my accounts." "Of course, Miss Thorne. I'm so sorry for the confusion." After I hung up, I sat staring at my checkbook for a long time. $1,200 for a Thanksgiving dinner I'd never agreed to host at a house where I was no longer welcome for a family that thought I was too selfish to be trusted with their financial well-being. This was the last bill I would ever pay for Cordelia's promises. That afternoon, Patricia called to confirm she'd drafted the cease and desist letter. "It's strong language," she warned. "Once Cordelia receives this, she'll know you're serious about legal action if she continues impersonating you to vendors. Send it. And Patricia, I want you to prepare one more document." "What kind of document?" "A formal notice of financial arrangement termination. Something official that makes it clear I'm withdrawing from all informal family financial agreements effective December 1st. I want it served the same day they get the cease and desist." "Ramona, that's going to cause significant hardship for your family. Are you sure you want to do this right before the holidays?" I thought about the catering invoice, about Cordelia telling Aunt Philomena I was having an emotional crisis, about being excluded from Thanksgiving while still being expected to pay for everyone's lives. "Patricia, they excluded me from their holiday celebration because they said I embarrassed the family by asking to be consulted before my money was volunteered in my home. If I'm too selfish to sit at their table, I'm too selfish to subsidize their lifestyle." "All right," she said quietly. "I'll prepare both documents. But, Ramona, make sure you're ready for the consequences. Once this goes out, your family relationships are going to change permanently." I looked around my home office, at the files documenting 8 years of financial support, at the spreadsheet showing exactly how much of their security had been built on my generosity, at the phone that had been ringing all week with relatives asking about holiday arrangements I'd never made. "Patricia, my family relationships changed the moment they decided I wasn't worth consulting before volunteering my money in my home. I'm just making it official." The letters would go out on November 24th. In 18 days, while my family gathered for a Thanksgiving dinner they thought I was paying for, they'd discover exactly what independence really cost. And for the first time in 8 years, I wouldn't be paying for it. I set down my fork
and took a breath I'd been preparing for 3 weeks. Bea, I'm not taking anything away. I'm stopping the contributions to accounts that are legally mine. The money that's already there for the twins is still there, but it's now in educational trusts that require proper documentation to access. But their spring semester tuition is due in January. We can't afford... Her voice broke off, and I could hear muffled conversation in the background, multiple voices talking over each other. You have 6 weeks to figure out financial aid, scholarships, or payment plans, I said calmly. The same options most families use for college funding. Ramona, please, we can talk about this. Just put everything back the way it was, and we'll work something out about Thanksgiving. Maybe Cordelia was too harsh. Put me on speaker, Bea. What? Put me on speakerphone. If the whole family is there discussing my financial obligations, then the whole family can hear my response. I heard fumbling, then the hollow echo of speakerphone activation. Suddenly, I could hear everything. Dishes clinking, children playing in another room, and the unmistakable sound of adults in crisis management mode. Can everyone hear me? I asked. Ramona. It was Cordelia's voice, tight with controlled anger. This is completely unnecessary drama. We're trying to have a family holiday, and I'm responding to 3 weeks of unauthorized financial commitments made in my name. Cordelia, did you or did you not hire Grandview Catering to provide Thanksgiving dinner at my house using my business address for billing? Silence. Then Aunt Philomena's voice, sharp as winter air. Answer the question, Cordelia. I was trying to help coordinate a family reconciliation. I thought if we could all get together, using someone else's money and home without their permission isn't coordination. It's theft. It's not theft. Cordelia's voice pitched higher. It's family. Ramona has more money than she knows what to do with, and she's being petty about one stupid conversation at a wedding. One conversation? I asked. Cordelia, in the past 3 weeks, you've committed my money for spring tuition, roof repairs, upgraded Christmas gifts, holiday travel expenses, Thanksgiving dinner, and told Aunt Philomena I was having an emotional crisis so you could justify taking over the family's financial management. Which part of that was one conversation? The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if they'd hung up. Finally, Jasper's voice. Ramona, even if Cordelia got carried away, shutting off everyone's insurance and calling in loans right before Christmas is pretty extreme. Jasper, your mortgage payment is going from $1,400 to $2,200 starting December 1st. That's still $300 below market rate for a house that size. The only thing extreme is that I've been subsidizing your living expenses for 3 years without any of you acknowledging it. We didn't ask you to do that, Beatrix said quietly. The words hit me like cold water. You didn't ask me to help when your boutique failed, Cordelia? You didn't ask me to co-sign your house, Jasper? You didn't ask me to contribute to the twins' college funds, Bea? That's different, Cordelia snapped. That was you offering to help family. And this is me offering to stop helping family that doesn't want me at their table. More silence. Then a new voice. Jeremy, Beatrix's husband, who rarely spoke up during family discussions. Ramona, I need to understand something. If you cut off the health insurance, what happens to Bea's medication? Her insulin costs $400 a month without coverage. My stomach dropped. In all my planning, I'd focused on the financial lessons and missed the immediate medical reality. Bea was type 1 diabetic, and insulin wasn't optional. The insurance doesn't terminate until December 31st. That gives you 30 days to find individual coverage or get insurance through Jeremy's employer. My employer doesn't offer health benefits, and individual coverage for a type 1 diabetic costs more than our mortgage. I closed my eyes.
This was the moment Patricia had warned me about, where teaching lessons crashed into causing genuine harm. But before I could respond, Aunt Philomena's voice cut through the tension. Jeremy, dear, what was the family spending on health insurance before Ramona took over the group plan? We couldn't afford individual coverage then either. Bea was rationing insulin and hoping nothing serious happened. So for 8 years, Ramona has been paying for insurance that kept Beatrix alive while the rest of you structured your budgets as if that $18,000 annual expense didn't exist? Aunt Philomena, that's not fair, Cordelia protested. We didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't ask. For 8 years, you've been living above your means because Ramona was quietly covering the gap. Now she's told you she's stopping, and instead of acknowledging what she's given you, you're angry that she won't continue giving it?
She's punishing us for one fight about a wedding. Cordelia's voice cracked with frustration. Cordelia, my voice was steady now, backed by 3 weeks of preparation and 8 years of documentation. Yesterday, I paid a $1,200 cancellation fee for catering I never ordered at a house I'm not welcome in for a dinner celebrating family bonds that apparently don't include me. That money could have paid for 3 months of Beatrix's insulin. Instead, it paid for your assumption that my money was available for your promises. The phone went quiet except for the sound of someone crying. Beatrix, I thought. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. The letters you received today outline the new financial arrangements starting December 1st. These are not punishments. They're market rates and standard terms that any bank would offer you. If you want to renegotiate any of these arrangements, you can contact Patricia Holloway, my attorney. Her number is in the letters. You're really going to lawyer up against your own family? Jasper asked. I'm going to protect myself from family members who think my money belongs to them, and my home is available for their events without my consent. Cordelia's voice, when it came, was different, smaller, but with an edge of something that sounded like panic. Ramona, if you do this, if you actually follow through with these threats, you'll destroy this family. Cordelia, you excluded me from this family 3 weeks ago. You told me I couldn't come to Thanksgiving unless I apologized for refusing to be your silent ATM. You've spent the time since then promising my money to everyone, hiring vendors in my name, and telling relatives I'm having a mental breakdown. What exactly am I destroying that you haven't already torn down? We can fix this, Beatrix said through tears. We can all sit down and talk and figure out new arrangements that work for everyone. Just don't cut off the insurance until we can find something else. I stared out my kitchen window at the November sky, gray and heavy with the promise of winter. 3 weeks ago, I would have said yes immediately, would have absorbed the costs and the chaos and found a way to make everyone comfortable. But 3 weeks ago, I hadn't understood how completely my family had restructured their lives around my financial support while convincing themselves they didn't need to include me in their emotional lives. The insurance stays active until December 31st. That gives you 5 weeks to find alternatives. But Betty, I need you to understand something. I'm not the villain for stopping payments on your lifestyle. I'm the person who's been keeping you alive for 8 years while you pretended that was normal. Ramona, Cordelia started, I'm done with this conversation. If anyone wants to discuss new financial arrangements, they can call Patricia Holloway. Her number is in the letters. I hung up before anyone could respond. For the next 4 hours, my phone rang constantly. Cordelia, Jasper, Beatrix, Aunt Philomena, and numbers I didn't recognize. Probably cousins who'd heard about the family crisis and wanted to mediate. I turned off the phone and sat in my quiet house, eating leftover chicken, and wondering if this was what victory was supposed to feel like. At 7 p.m., there was a knock at my door. Through the peephole, I saw Aunt Philomena standing on my porch, holding a covered dish and looking every inch the family matriarch who'd decided to take matters into her own hands. I opened the door. Aunt Philomena? She stepped past me into the entryway. Ramona, dear, she said,
I brought you some real Thanksgiving dinner, and I think it's time you and I had a conversation about what happens next." Aunt Philomena set her casserole dish on my kitchen counter and looked around my quiet house with the assessing gaze of someone who'd spent decades managing family crises. "You know," she said, untying her coat, "this is the first peaceful Thanksgiving I've experienced in about 10 years. I poured 2 cups of coffee while she uncovered what turned out to be her famous sweet potato casserole, the one she only made for special occasions. "How bad was it after I hung up?" "Educational," she said with a dry smile. "Cordelia spent 20 minutes explaining how you'd manipulated everyone into depending on you financially so you could control them. Jasper kept running numbers on his phone, trying to figure out if he could afford his actual mortgage payment. Beatrix was researching insulin prices and having what I believed the young people call a panic attack." She settled into the chair across from me, looking every inch the retired school principal she'd been for 30 years. "You know," she said, "I had the RSVP for your wedding out to every single family member by Friday after your fight with Cordelia. Everyone knew you were not going through with the wedding. But the most interesting part was when I asked them each to tell me exactly how much money you'd provided over the years and how much they'd paid back. I'm guessing they didn't have those numbers handy. Cordelia insisted it was impossible to calculate because family support isn't supposed to be transactional. Jasper thought maybe he owed you a few $1,000s, but nothing major. Beatrix genuinely had no idea you'd been paying the family's health insurance for 8 years. She thought it was some kind of group discount through your business."
I sipped my coffee, tasting the bitterness. So they really didn't understand what they were asking me to continue providing. Oh, they understood perfectly once I walked them through it. I spent an hour with my calculator and your letters, adding up mortgage subsidies, missed loan payments, insurance premiums, and emergency interventions. The total came to just over $240,000. Philomena's eyes were sharp as winter stars. That's when the room got very quiet. What did Cordelia say to that? She said family shouldn't keep score. I told her that was rich, coming from someone who'd kept a detailed score of every perceived slight and moment of insufficient gratitude for the past 8 years. Philomena's smile had an edge that reminded me why even the toughest kids in her classes had never crossed her twice. Then I asked her how much she'd contributed to Beatrix's medical expenses, or Jasper's emergency fund, or anyone's financial security besides her own. I could picture the scene. My family around Beatrix's dining table, probably still wearing their good Thanksgiving clothes, being lectured by a 78-year-old woman who'd perfected the art of uncomfortable truth-telling decades before any of them were born. The real revelation came when Jeremy finally spoke up, Philomena continued. He'd been quiet during your phone call, but after we'd gone through all the numbers, he looked at Beatrix and said, "Honey, we need to talk about how we've been living above our means for 8 years while pretending it was normal." How did that go over? About as well as you'd expect. Beatrix started crying again, Jasper got defensive about his house payments, and Cordelia, Philomena paused, choosing her words carefully. Cordelia had what I can only describe as a complete meltdown, screaming about how you'd planned this whole thing to humiliate her, how you'd manipulated everyone into depending on you just so you could pull the rug out from under them at the worst possible moment. And what did you say to that? I asked her to explain exactly how someone manipulates people into accepting free money, subsidized loans, and paid insurance premiums. Philomena's voice carried the same tone she'd probably used on students who tried to blame their failing grades on unfair teachers. Then I asked her to show me one single instance where you'd used your financial support to control anyone's behavior or decisions. She leaned back in her chair, looking satisfied. That's when the real truth came out. Cordelia admitted that you'd never asked for anything in return for your help.
Never demanded gratitude, never held the money over anyone's heads, never even mentioned the amounts involved. According to her, that actually made it worse because it meant they never got the chance to properly appreciate what you were doing. I stared at her. So I was wrong for not making them feel guilty about accepting help? Apparently. Cordelia's logic was that if you'd been more explicit about the costs, they would have been more grateful, and then this whole situation could have been avoided. Philomena shook her head. I told her that was the most entitled reasoning I'd heard since Jimmy Morrison tried to convince his cheating was the teacher's fault for making the test too easy to cheat on. The comparison made me laugh despite everything. My first real laugh in 3 weeks. What happened after that? Jeremy stood up and announced that he and Beatrix were going home to start making phone calls about insurance and financial aid. Jasper muttered something about calling his mortgage company to discuss payment options, and Cordelia, Philomena paused, choosing her words carefully. Cordelia declared that she was going to call you every day until you came to your senses and restored everyone's arrangements. Oh, good, I said dryly. Something to look forward to. I told her that if she contacted you directly instead of going through your attorney, I would personally ensure that every relative in 4 states heard the complete story of how she'd been volunteering your money and your home without permission. Amazing how quickly she decided that legal channels might be more appropriate after all. Over the next hour, Philomena filled me in on the rest of the family fallout. Jasper had already called his mortgage company and discovered that refinancing at current market rates would actually save him money in the long run, since my below-market arrangement hadn't been building his credit properly. Beatrix and Jeremy were exploring health insurance through the ACA marketplace and had found a plan that, while more expensive than my group coverage, was still manageable with some budget adjustments. But the most interesting development, Philomena said, serving herself a second piece of casserole, was when I asked each of them what they planned to contribute to family financial emergencies going forward. I'm almost afraid to ask. Jasper suggested that maybe they should all start a family emergency fund, with everyone contributing monthly. Beatrix thought they should research family health insurance options that didn't depend on one person's generosity. Even Jeremy mentioned that his company might be expanding benefits next year if they could get enough employees interested. And Cordelia said that wasn't her responsibility since she had her own financial challenges to manage. Philomena's expression made it clear what she thought of that response. I pointed out that her financial challenges had been significantly reduced by $89,000 worth of your money over the years, and perhaps it was time for her to start managing her own budget without assuming someone else would cover the gaps. The conversation continued as darkness fell outside my kitchen windows. Philomena had brought more than casserole. She'd brought 8 years of family observations, a clear assessment of everyone's actual financial situations, and a plan for moving forward that didn't depend on my continued martyrdom. The bottom line, she said finally, is that your family has been living in a fantasy where financial support appears magically without cost or consequence. Today, reality arrived with certified mail delivery, and they're discovering that adult relationships require adult conversations about money, expectations, and boundaries. Do you think they'll actually learn from this? Philomena considered the question seriously. Jasper and Beatrix will. They're fundamentally decent people who got comfortable with an arrangement they didn't fully understand. Once they adjust their budgets and expectations, they'll probably be better off, more independent, more realistic about their finances, and more appreciative of actual help when it's offered. And Cordelia? Cordelia will likely spend the next few months trying to find another relative willing to subsidize her lifestyle while she complains about how ungrateful and manipulative you are. Philomena shrugged. But that's Cordelia's choice to make and her consequences to live with. 3 months later, the new family dynamic had settled into something I hadn't expected, something healthier.
Jasper called every few weeks to update me on his mortgage refinancing progress and had already paid back $2,000 of his old debt without being asked. Beatrix sent regular photos of the twins, along with updates about their scholarship applications and part-time jobs. They'd found manageable health insurance and had even started a small emergency fund. Cordelia, true to Philomena's prediction, had stopped speaking to me entirely after Patricia rejected her demands to restore the old financial arrangements. According to Aunt Philomena, she'd been trying to convince various cousins that I owed her compensation for emotional damages caused by my financial abuse. The cousins, apparently, were less sympathetic than she had hoped. In February, I received a formal letter from Jasper's attorney. Not a demand or complaint, but a proposal for a structured repayment plan for his remaining debt, complete with interest calculations and realistic timelines. In March, Beatrix called to ask if I'd be willing to serve as a reference for the twins' college applications, mentioning their strong work ethic and family financial responsibility. They'd found manageable health insurance and had even started a small emergency fund. Neither of them apologized for the past 8 years, but both of them seemed to understand that going forward, family support would be a conversation rather than an assumption. The most surprising call came in April, from Jeremy. Ramona? I wanted you to know that Beatrix and I have been talking, and we think you should consider coming to the twins' graduation in May. Not because you've been helping with the college funds, but because you're their aunt, and they'd like you there. What about Cordelia? Cordelia doesn't get to decide who's welcome at our family events anymore, he said simply. That was never her job. We just let her think it was. I went to the graduation. Cordelia was there, sitting on the opposite side of the auditorium, with a carefully neutral expression. We didn't speak, but we didn't need to. The message was clear. Our family had room for both of us, but only if we both understood that belonging didn't come with financial obligations or emotional manipulation. As I watched my nephew and niece cross the stage to receive their diplomas funded partly by scholarships they'd earned, partly by jobs they'd worked, and partly by college funds I'd contributed without strings attached, I realized something important. For 8 years, I'd been trying to provide security for people I loved. What I'd actually been providing was the illusion that security came without cost, effort, or gratitude. The real gift I'd given my family wasn't money. It was the chance to learn that they were capable of taking care of themselves. And the real gift they'd given me, eventually, was the chance to learn that love doesn't require endless financial sacrifice to prove itself. Sometimes the best thing you can do for people who take you for granted is to stop being available to be taken, not out of spite, but out of respect, for them and for yourself. That Thanksgiving dinner invitation never came with an apology. But it turned out I didn't need either one to build the family relationships I actually wanted to have.